Okay. Ready?
Good morning. My name is Hector Bordes. I'm the head of Building and Safety for the County of Los Angeles Department of Public Works. We serve the county unincorporated areas with 16 cities. Welcome all of you to our second webinar from the Solar Energy Action Committee. And this webinar focuses on Assembly Bill 2188 and methods to reduce follow-up inspections for small residential rooftop solar energy systems. And glad to have many of you online. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Solar Energy Action Committee, and I'm going to provide a brief overview on that before we kick things off. Today we have two great presenters. We have Alan Fields and Don Hughes, and they're going to provide, they're going to go back and forth with their presentation and provide great information. A little intro to Alan. Alan works for Sungevity Design and Engineering Department. He's a specialist in the solar energy industry. He's involved in making sure Sungevity's designs are compliant with AHJ, utility, and code requirements, keeping the company and its installers up to date on codes and standards, and reaching out to building department employees across the country. Don Hughes is a former building official. He now is with the Center for Sustainable Energy. He's a code standard specialist. And those of you who may not be familiar with the Center for Sustainable Energy, their mission is to deliver high-impact sustainable energy programs. They're a mission-driven, nonprofit organization, and they have subject matter expertise and on-the-ground expert experience with a wide variety of sustainable energy solutions. And they're a trusted partner in making ambitious energy goals, saving money, and improving the world. So I'm going to kick things off with providing some background on the Solar Energy Action Committee. This committee was formed by the County of Los Angeles Department of Public Works, and I'm currently the lead on this project and a facilitator. And the main reason why this committee was formed is because over a year ago, the county, we were facing tremendous challenges, lots of questions being asked about how to deal with solar photovoltaic. The industry is changing so rapidly and growing so fast. There's so many different questions out there, and we wanted to help industry. And when I talk about industry, that's just also the public sector and the private sector, help all of those in industry address the challenges and see how we can make industry move forward, and ultimately just to put more solar systems on the ground and on rooftop while keeping in mind safety. This committee is made up of experts throughout the field. We have folks from various jurisdictions, installers, contractors, utility representatives, we have manufacturers, testing labs, and many other folks there are really committed to solving many problems that are facing the industry. Some of the things that we're looking at right now is Assembly Bill 2188. I don't know if all of you are online are from California, and this bill changed some of the practices and ultimately goes to expedite installations and permitting and inspections of small-scale residential systems, 10 kilowatts or less. UL 2703 is a standard that is in development and soon will be finalized, and there's a lot of questions regarding UL 2703. What is it? How does it impact jurisdictions? How does it impact manufacturers and installers? So there's a lot of things that we're looking at that and providing answers. Interconnections is a challenge. And a homeowner has a system installed, and now they need to wait sometimes several weeks, even months, to have the connection by the utility. So we're looking at those issues from the perspective, both from the utility perspectives, from the installer perspective and homeowner perspective, and how we can improve those processes and systems to make things a lot quicker. We're also working with various county departments and private sector on developing a manual, guidelines to help install the larger scale systems, put those on the ground, make things simpler for the solar companies to understand what are the challenges, what is the development process, what are the technical issues, and make things as simple as possible so they can get on the ground running and schedule their projects appropriately, and ultimately, in the end, make some money. So, SEAC, Solar Action Committee, is really about communication, breaking down those barriers, getting people to talk to each other, really communicate what are the challenges, and have some real tough discussions. Sometimes they end up in conflicts, and which is good to have conflicts, because then we can solve problems. But it's all keeping in mind the ultimate goal is to get more solar on the ground and more solar in the rooftops. Some great relationships are being formed, some great discussions are happening, and more will happen. Now, for more information on Solar Action Committee, please visit the website. We have monthly meetings, and we encourage folks to join us online or in person, and we have these webinars. So go to the website. There's a lot more information on SEAC, information on the monthly meetings, who the members are, and some of the issues that we have tackled, and the recommended practices that are coming out of SEAC. Now, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alan and Don, and they're going to go back and forth with their presentation. And after the presentation, we're going to open it up to questions, and we'll be here for a while to answer all your questions. With that, Alan, Don, I'll hand it off to you.
Great, thank you. Let me just figure out how to share the correct screen. Are you seeing the PowerPoint right now?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. Okay, so Don, could you start off with the issue statement, and we're going to also go into the background?
Okay, I think I'm off mute. I hope I am. So the issue statement 2 is basically what SEAC calls their second recommendation in a series of briefing notes that are now issue statements and recommendations. So the question to the group was, what methods should be considered in order to reduce follow-up inspections for roof-mounted PV systems without compromising safety or quality? And again, this wasn't asking a group of installers. This was asking a group of leading AHJs and installers and an entire group of people, so that we could all come to a consensus that everybody would be happy with. Next slide, eh?
Yeah. And also, so more into the background, Don?
Yeah, I can't see the little stuff on the bottom here, so sorry about this. So the background is that field inspections do create more work for the AHJs and the installers. It rolls things over to tomorrow, which rolls things over to tomorrow, and just perpetuates this never-ending cycle of you can't keep up with your daily assignments and nobody's ever going to get anything done. So it affects everybody in the industry, not just the installers, the homeowners, and it also affects the AHJs. So a lot of the reasons for failed inspections are due to just a lack of, maybe not an understanding of the codes. It might be a lack of an understanding of codes and standards, and it may just be a lack of mutual understanding of the codes and standards. So there's a huge necessity for us all to come together to have mutual trainings and figure out how we can have a mutual understanding of the codes and standards, so that you don't think it's one thing and I think it's the other. Preparation for the inspection. Everybody needs to be prepared for the inspection, the installers and the AHJ. And SEAC has provided a great issue statement number 1, which included a lot of guidance on that preparation for inspections. Also, the quality of work is important, and that's something that the inspector looks at. As an inspector, if I used to get out of the truck and I'd see that the guy had his lunch on his shirt, I kind of figured he didn't much care about the way that he looked or the way that his work looked. And it just makes you look deeper. He might have been the greatest installer there is, but you don't want to put these giant red flags or billboards up that you don't care about yourself or your work. So the quality of work, the way that the people present themselves is pretty important to the inspector. And training goes back to the understanding of the codes and standards. Without mutual training, you're never going to have a mutual understanding of how to interpret the codes, so that the installer can install things in the intent of the code, and that the inspector can make sure that they did that. So all of that boils down to communications of expectations between the inspector and installer, so that we're all on the same page. It's probably the most critical part of the successful inspection process.
It's also worth noting that even though AB 2188, for those of you who know of the bill, even though it mandates single inspections, it also states that if there are correction items that are observed by the inspector, it's completely acceptable for the inspector to write a corrections notice and have follow-up inspection. So just because AB 2188 mandates these single inspections, re-inspections are still actually permitted. That's one of the questions that I've heard from a few installers at this point. There are also a few key considerations that we'd like to account for. So economic factors such as financial deadlines, state or local rebates, proposed tax credits, utility rate changes could create an increase in the demand for solar and the number of installations. When the threat of expiration of a tax credit or dramatic changes to rate structures loom in the distance, we can see kind of a quick burst of PV permit applications for building departments. So in light of this, installers and inspectors are really encouraged to work together to find new solutions to handle that high volume that everyone will be seeing. AHJs can benefit from not needing to return for follow-up inspections, which frees up inspection staff to be able to keep up with the advancing workload. Some of these solutions just simply require the effective use of resources through a consistent and efficient streamlined process. For example, one way to practice efficiency and avoid a follow-up inspection would be for maybe both the inspector and installer to be prepared and to allow for minor corrections to be made during the inspection process. This is mostly a point for installers, but it should be mentioned that homeowners are very inconvenienced by re-inspections. A great experience for a customer shouldn't include a lot of avoidable re-inspections. So that's something to keep in mind. And so SEAC has come up with some recommendations for this issue statement. We reached a consensus on this on November 23rd of last year. And all of SEAC's recommendations can be found in on SEAC's website in the Our Work tab. So you can check out the recommendations for at least 1 and 2, and I believe that 3 and 4 might also be on there. Maybe we can touch on that later. But let's go into the recommendations, and first one with Dawn.
Back to me in the studio. So recommendation A is states that persons involved in the installation of inspection of PV systems, installation and inspection, so everybody installing and everybody inspecting it should be qualified and trained in not only how to put in a PV system, but you really couldn't successfully do that without having a basic understanding of electrical theory, the chapters that apply to everything in the code book, which is pretty much 1 through 4. So in the NEC, the way it's structured is chapters 1 through 4 apply to everything except as superseded by 5, 6, and 7. So given solar is in chapter 6, there may be something in grounding in Article 250 that you need to know, and unless it's superseded by something in 690.47 or something regarding grounding, then you have to go with all of Article 250. So you really need to be familiar with Article Chapter 1 about how to do things, Chapter 2 about bonding and grounding, and 3 is your wiring methods, and 4 is overcurrent protection and stuff. So you really need to understand these other sections and not just how to put in bolt down some panels. So the qualifications and training really should include all of the applicable fighter stuff, and basic training should be for everybody. It should be done on a regular basis, and like I said, it should be mutual training. Somehow we've got to get the installers and the AHJs in the same room so that they both agree with what is an acceptable bonding and grounding method and what is an acceptable interconnection point to comply with 705.12 D2. I mean, are we all on the same page on this stuff? I don't know, and we really need to get there. Otherwise, we're never going to be able to expedite this stuff because everybody's guilty of association with the lowest common denominator here. So we all need to bring all of our standards up so we know what we're doing. We can walk in and look at it and make it quick.
Yeah, you can't forget Article 250, even if it is one of the most misunderstood chapters of the NEC. No one can get away from not being able to understand it, or no one should be able to get away from understanding it. There we go.
Well, given that even most electricians think that the NEC means they're not exactly clear code, yeah, you really got to read these things a couple of times to understand them. But not only that, it's you may have your own understanding of it, and that might not be how the inspector understands it. So that's the importance of the mutual training and regional basis, so that what they're doing in LA may not be exactly what they're doing in San Francisco Bay Area, but as long as all of the inspectors and all of the installers in those regions are on the same page, then we're successful. So recommendation B says that the installers and the inspectors should be familiar with the inspection-related material of the California Solar Permitting Guidebook and the manufacturer's installation instructions for the products. So the California Solar Permitting Guidebook is really a key piece of expediting permitting processes, because there's rules in there and requirements and recommendations that should be followed by the AHJs, and the installers should be prepared to be within those are really minimum standards there. I mean, if you can't stay within that, then you're really not, you're not going to be successful in expediting permitting or inspections. Because
there's a lot of resources. There's a lot of resources in the guidebook too. I mean, can you touch on CSE's work right now with the guidebook?
Yeah, there's tons of resources available in the guidebook. So what CSE, the Center for Sustainable Energy, did is we took the toolkit documents that are contained within the guidebook, and we made them available as downloads, PDF form or Word documents on our website. So a lot of the jurisdictions in California that have already adopted an expedited permitting process, which I think is about somewhere around 20 or 25% of them have adopted a permitting process. A huge percentage of those have actually downloaded the expedited permitting process from our website with the downloadable forms, and it's right there, boom, simple forms for them to download. But also we offer technical assistance to support AB 2188. I'm pretty much the technical support. If anybody wants to contact me, we'll have some contact information and Q&A at the end of this program. So it's a great resource. CSE is a great resource, and the California Solar Permitting Guidebook actually so good that I've talked to several people in other states that are adopting their own versions of expedited permitting based on what we're doing out here in California. So we need to continue to be successful.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. So for recommendation C, so the third recommendation is that the installer may expedite the inspection process by having a qualified representative on site to assist with the inspection. With the agreement of the installer and the inspector, of course, minor corrections may be performed at time of inspection to avoid a reinspection. So this is beneficial for both parties. If it's in the installer's best interest to make sure that the individual hosting the inspection is familiar with the installed system itself. The recommended amount of knowledge or competency of this the individual sitting for the inspection isn't really quantifiable or able to be grouped with a certain type of certification, but there are a lot of different educational resources out there. And also regarding what kind of work would be able to be redone on the site, that's of course dependent on that inspection host's qualifications. I mean, you wouldn't expect someone who is not a licensed electrician to be able to correct some of the wiring that was done incorrectly. But if it's something as simple as like reapplying markings and labels, then that would make sense to have the inspection host be able to apply those if there was just a minor correction from the inspector. I mean, it's much better to allow the person standing inspection 5 or 10 minutes to make those corrections versus having to write a corrections notice and reschedule an inspection, which adds to the following day's workload and requires additional travel time and starting the inspection over in a lot of cases. So we highly recommend, when possible, allowing installers and qualified inspection hosts to make minor corrections on site during the first inspection. And Don?
So I'm gonna actually keep going with Part C, recommendation C.
Yeah.
So as an AHJ, I spent a lot of years as an AHJ, and I was heavily involved in all of this stuff. And we all know, I don't know who's on the website here, but from CSE, the Center for Sustainable Energy, my perspective is not as an AHJ anymore, and I'm not supporting anybody. We support everybody. The Center for Sustainable Energy is not. We don't lobby. We don't get involved in it. We're not the whipping people. We're not here to do anything other than provide outreach and support for anybody who needs it in regards to implementing solar PV or sustainable energy. And that's all we're here to do is promote. And we're not here to point any fingers. But as an AHJ, one of the things that I dealt with in regards to what Alan just said about C was there was this whole push, and it was pushed by industry to create this expedited permitting process. And it was pushed pretty heavily by some really, really intelligent people who knew exactly what they were doing. They were very good at what they did, and it got through. And then the first thing that happened was the inspectors were going out to the field, and we were doing a lot of permitting, and things were picking up, and you'd get out in the field, and there would be a guy out in the field that basically, I think out of economics, they put the least qualified person on the job. They probably were paying him the least. And I can most assuredly tell you that the inspection AHJs, there was talk saying, that this is something that all these intelligent people got together and created, but then we show up for inspection and there's no follow-through. We don't have the intelligence. We don't have that game that you know what I mean, the drive to succeed anymore. It's we got the inspector out here and we got the install done, we got the permit done in rapid time, but then the ball was hugely dropped by not continuing that intelligent quality person to carry that through. So when you get to an inspection and the guy doesn't even have a screwdriver and doesn't know anything about the PV system, it's really disheartening for the AHJs to say, we went through all this trouble to expedite this stuff, and you guys aren't doing your part to help us expedite the permit or expedite the inspection. So there was talk about that, and I think that it's really important to not hurt your credibility for the industry to get back on that ball, to put the qualified people on the job site and have quality inspections and get them done in a hurry.
Right.
So yeah, I'm just telling you what
go
people are talking about from just a medium position, man. There was talk. So anyway, recommendation D in the says that the California Solar Permitting Guidebook inspection checklist is encouraged to be used so that the inspector installer will know what to expect. But if the AHJ develops a different inspection checklist, then that checklist should be completely fine, but it should be provided when the installation permit is issued. They should say, this is what we expect, or this is how we enforce this is how we interpret that, so that the AHJs are given, clear, concise instructions. The AHJs should be encouraged to post their inspection criteria and policies on their website. So basically, oops, lost myself here. So basically, it is important for the AHJ to communicate all of their expectations in advance, and knowing what the inspector is looking for so that you can get your final sign-off in the inspection, it's critical to the success of the installer passing a single inspection. Some jurisdictions are actually turning to inspection tools. I know of at least one that's doing virtual inspection technology, and we're there. I mean, currently, one of the biggest hurdles to all of this stuff is online permitting. I mean, we're in 2016, and it's just archaic to still be using pencils and papers and taking days to review things and having to go make 3 trips to the building department office to drop off plans. So we really need to look at these recommendations in the California Solar Permitting Guidebook and get our stuff together. The other recommendations in the guidebook is to use a concise inspection checklist, to enable inspection requests by phone, online, or by email. I'm gonna give my email address right now. It's don.hughes@energycenter.org. And anybody that emails me, I can hook you up with a program right now that's being funded by the Department of Energy to offer free online permitting program to any AHJ that's willing to participate in the development of it. And they are right now looking for AHJs to help. So if you know any AHJ that wants an online process, wants to be involved in streamlining things, we can hook them up and get them involved with a company that's actually going to going to give them that online process for free. So provide inspections during the next business day. Provide scheduling time windows for on-site inspection for no more than 2 hours, or these are recommendations, and you may include notification of the utility if that's one of the things that AHJ does, is contact their utility. So these are recommendations in the guidebook, and state law, AB 2188, says that the jurisdiction should be in general, substantial, not even general, just substantial conformance with these recommendations and other recommendations contained in the guidebook.
Okay. So next, the installer can expedite the inspection process by providing an applicable, completed quality control and code-based installation checklist to the inspector. So a lot of funding providers out there will generally have their own quality control and installation checklists that they would require for them to fund a system. So this checklist kind of dovetails nicely with that last recommendation to use the guidebook's installation checklist. Although the guidebook's inspection checklist is a great resource for an inspection host to be prepared to answer certain questions from the inspector or show the inspector certain aspects of an installation. A company's internal quality control checklist may touch on aspects of the installation that aren't specifically related to the NEC or building code, but might just be closer to workmanlike practices. So, I mean, the example on the right here is just kind of a revised version of the guidebook's inspection checklist that's been modified to be used by an installer. And there can be a large variety of what these can look like, but the big thing is basically just showing the inspector that there was some actual care that was done, or there was some real care that went into the work that was done. So yeah, Don, did you see many of these installation or inspection checklists provided by installers while you were inspecting?
I didn't while I was inspecting, because I was inspecting, and I actually came out of the field about 6 or 7 years ago. I became the chief electrical inspector for Santa Clara County, and had Stanford University and the whole county. So I was pretty much doing all of the electrical plan checks for all of that, so I didn't really have time to be a field inspector anymore. But I saw a few things, checklists that the installers had actually created on their own, and it was great, you know.
Right. Okay. Recommendation F then.
This one looks like it's for me. So recommendation F says pretty much the same thing we've been repeating. It's a kind of our mantra right now, that the inspectors and the installers need to be encouraged to get on the same page. But the best way to do that is to attend the regular local IAEI, which is the International Association of Electrical Inspectors, chapter meetings. These are, you know, they're attended by a lot of the electrical inspectors in your region, and you can get in there and talk to them. I know some really successful solar contractors that did that up in Northern California, and you just knew they did good work, and you also, you were going to see them on Monday or whatever the next meeting was. So if the guy said he's going to fix something, you knew he was going to do that. It made it a lot easier to just, you know, not have to write as many correction notices when it was something minor that you could just say, hey, you make sure you fix that. And I knew the guy was going to do that based on the relationship that we had formed at the chapter meetings and at the inspections, you know. So ICC chapter meetings, that's the International Code Council. A lot of building officials attend that, and that's a great place to interact with how the building official is going to have his people interpret the codes, and they provide regular training. So the people putting on that training are people like me and John Tacker and Pete Jackson and some leading people, so that you're going to get good interpretations, and you'll actually have a decent argument when somebody's misinterpreting something. You'll know the code section, and you'll know how it should be interpreted, and also you'll have connections with people who you can say, hey, I talked to Don over there at the IAI meeting, and he said this is how it should be done, and you might have a better argument than this is how we do it, period, you know. So attend the chapter meetings, find out where they are, go online, find out where your local chapter meetings are for IAI, or you can contact me and I'll help you get connections for that. You can actually set up, they'll actually set up trainings at your facilities sometimes. I know IAI is willing to train, you know, they're willing to provide the training. So those forums both provide an opportunity for continual dialogue between the inspectors and the installers, and they do build better communication channels so that you can stay updated with the new technology from the manufacturers. I know you even have the opportunity to be involved with groups like SEAC. You know, I think anybody's encouraged to listen in on their webinars, and you're going to hear it from leading racking manufacturers like Iron Ridge to, you know, MET Labs is there, Underwriters Laboratories is part of SEAC, and you know, Pete Jackson, John Tacker, myself, all of the leading people from Enphase. These people are all talking about what's going on. So if you want to know what the industry is doing, tune into the SEAC meetings. I really encourage that, and I do encourage you to attend the IAEI meetings and the ICC meetings. It's really important to create that relationship, and that's, you know, I can't say enough about that.
And note the end of that. Stay updated on new technology from the manufacturers. This also is stay updated on AHJ's opinions regarding new technology. I mean, for folks who are installing all throughout the state of California, you know that every county is generally going to be different. Regions are going to be very familiar with certain technology, whereas some other regions might not be. I mean, down the line, at the beginning of next year, rapid shutdown is going to be a requirement in the NEC in California, and getting ahead of that and going to these IAEI and ICC chapter meetings and finding out generally what your region is going to be expecting for something like rapid shutdown will help you stay ahead of failed inspections or plan check corrections. We're not even touching on plan check with this webinar right now, but I mean, it's great to stay ahead of any new code requirements that really you might not know what the AHJ community is going to be expecting from that.
So given that these are IAEI chapter meetings, if you go back to the first part of the stuff that I was talking about, the IAEI, they're not sitting around just talking about solar. I mean, it is the, you know, the latest and greatest, and it's something that they're very concerned about, and they do talk about it. And they typically have a 1-hour lunch kind of opportunity where a lot of times they'll bring in outside manufacturers or industry reps to talk about new and emerging technologies and that sort of thing in these meetings. But they also talk about, you know, Article 250. They talk about overcurrent protection. They have all different series of things, and you can actually request your local chapter to put on a presentation about overcurrent protection, about interconnections, about line-side taps. They will do that for you. If your industry is willing to come and sit down and put a few butts in the chairs, they'll specifically design some sort of training for you. I'm certain of it. And if you can't find it, contact me and I'll get in touch with the IAEI and we'll see if we can't put a class together with CSE and in your region. Absolutely, the training's out there. You got to get it, or else when the guy says, "Hey, how did you bond this?" and you go, "That's not a good answer." You really should have an answer to that. And then when the guy says, "Wow, this guy really knows what he's talking about," he's going to stop asking questions about how you did this or how you did that, and making you open things. You know, we have to open enough percentage of boxes and combiners and J boxes and things to get an idea that the guy knows what he's doing. The inspector's not out there to open everything and look at every piece that you did, but if as you're going down the line, pieces and parts don't look right, you may wind up having a very bad inspection process that could take several days to fix, you know, small things that we just keep digging for because everything we look at didn't have a good answer or wasn't done right.
Okay. And our last recommendation, which is going to be kind of a multi-part one, is that the installer can expedite the inspection process by providing the following equipment and documents for inspection. This is kind of related to just being prepared for the inspection. So there are a few things that we recommend bringing. Of course, an OSHA-approved ladder that's capable of providing access to the roof. So obviously, don't install ladders on uneven surfaces without a proper method of securing it. That photo on the right side is kind of a terrifying thing that I ended up finding. Always remember that 3-foot extension above the point of support for straight ladders, and secure that ladder at a proper angle. I mean, do your take the distance from ground to your top support and divide that by 4, and that should be the amount that the bottom of the ladder is set from the wall. Just be ready for an inspector to be willing to go on the roof. It might not happen in every case, but you should be ready. Also, be sure to have your approved plans and permits on the job site. I keep on hearing about instances of installers not bringing the approved plans. I mean, redlining is at the discretion of the inspector. It's not necessarily something that has to be allowed by an inspector. And this can include stuff like supporting documentation that would have been submitted with the plan, such as the system's fire classification. So be sure to have proof that your modules are a certain fire type and that your racking system is classified A, B, or C with certain types of modules. So be sure to have that on the job site. Also, be sure to bring your installation instructions, at least for the following equipment. I mean, you've got to have it for your modules, your inverter, your mounting or racking system, grounding and bonding. I mean, most of the times well, depending on your equipment, your grounding and bonding specs and instructions might be covered by your mounting or racking system or the module installation manual, but it's really important to have these so that the inspector can even verify that they were done in the right way. I have heard of some failed inspections where an inspector is saying that the racking system was not installed correctly, even though it was. If you have your installation manual there, you can show the inspector it was installed according to the installation instructions. That's just huge.
Tune in to 2703 when SEAC presents that. That's the standard for bonding and grounding, mounting and clamping devices. So they're going to probably give some great guidance on that. I think that Hector said we're going to touch on that shortly. So stay tuned.
That one will be huge, yeah. Also, be sure to bring some tools to remove or attach PV modules and equipment. Bring your torque wrench if the inspector wants to actually verify that you torque down your modules or your racking system according to the installation instructions.
Alan, I want to weigh in for the AHJs on the line. If there's any inspectors on the line, I have never made anybody remove a module from a PV system, other than maybe one time when some junction boxes I looked bad, the ones that were accessible, and there was one under a module, and I had them lifted up. But it is not a general practice to have people removing modules. It's a difficult thing to do. You're going to break bonding and grounding stuff. You're better off to not remove them and encourage them prior to the installation to not bury modules or junction boxes or combiner boxes beneath the module if you, or have them open for inspection or something. But don't make a habit of going and telling people that they have to remove modules. This recommendation is for the installer to be prepared to do so.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for touching on that. And of course, I mean, miscellaneous electrical equipment. I mean, bring your acorn clamps, sockets, crimpers, just standard things for quick corrections in the field if the inspector would allow that. And of course, speaking of quick fixes in the field, bring extra labels, especially the warning photovoltaic power source label. It's really easy to forget that on certain things. I mean, maybe you forgot on your junction box, maybe you forgot on certain exposed raceways, but it's very common to forget that. So I highly recommend always bringing at least a roll of that label and just extra labels in general. That's huge. Also, a lot of AHJs might require certain affidavits if you would like to waive the need to provide certain access for inspection of carbon monoxide or smoke alarms, or maybe for high efficiency plumbing fixtures if an AHJ is requiring that upgrade for PV systems, but always be prepared with those. That's a really horrible way to fail an inspection if you have no access to the interior of the home because the customer isn't there and you forgot your affidavit. So be sure to bring those as well. Also, we recommend providing access to some of your installation photos. So the last SEAC webinar for recommended practices #1 actually touched on some guidelines that we recommend for installation photos. An inspector will hopefully accept the photo of the interior of a junction box instead of requiring you to pull a module off to provide access to that junction box. And also for stuff like showing anything that's really inaccessible. And that's basically it as far as the recommendations. So these recommendations, of course, they're applying to really all solar energy stakeholders, mainly AHJs and installers. But SEAC believes that this would actually benefit really all stakeholders in the solar energy industry. And then we've also provided some links for SEAC, Center for Sustainable Energy, IAEI and ICC, but like Don mentioned, if you are looking to get in touch with CSE or maybe find out what IAEI chapter would be best for you, feel free to reach out to him. And I believe we're ready for questions and answers.
Alan, Jeff, Alan, Don, thank you very much for the presentation. We appreciate getting your perspectives and presenting the recommendations coming out of SEAC. I just want to apologize for our screen was flickering. I'm not sure why. We'll take a look at that issue after the webinar is over and see how we can fix that. Just a little bit more on the Solar Energy Action Committee. We really encourage you folks to listen into the meetings, either in person or the webinars. It's not just hearing the recommendations at the end. It's actually listening to the discussions that are happening, and you're going to hear different perspectives on an issue. And sometimes what happens is we start with one issue and we dig a little deeper and we find out, hey, there's a lot more to this that meets the eye. And you'll hear different perspectives from installers, testing labs, fire departments, you name it. And it's a great insight. You know, sometimes you have an installer sitting next to a utility, and they're sharing, you know, their war stories, and all of a sudden they're learning from each other on how to make things better for themselves, and that helps industry as a whole. So I encourage you folks to participate. Go to the website, and now we're going to go and some Q&As. So the first one we have is as a general rule for flush roof-mounted solar equipment, what is the maximum weight load per square foot allowable before structural calculations are usually required? This would apply to PV or thermal collectors. Who could tackle that? Don or Alan?
You know, I'll take it from here first. It depends on the AHJ. Typically, we started off saying that about 5 pounds per square foot was adequate. That's what they first started off in the solar ABCs. I believe that we said 4 pounds per square foot in the Solar California Permitting Guidebook. So basically, you're replacing a 20-pound live load. So somebody can walk around on your roof. You got a 20-pound per square foot live load. You're replacing that with a 4-pound dead load. So 4 or 5 pounds. Some AHJs allow you to go to 5. Most of the AHJs that have adopted the Solar Permitting Guidebook have limited it to 4 pounds for solar PV, and I believe 5 pounds for solar thermal, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so in the guidebook, there is a structural criteria for residential flush-mounted solar arrays checklist that actually has a whole lot of criteria that a system must comply with in order to avoid structural engineering analysis from a professional engineer. Obviously, this checklist can be amended by AHJs depending on climatic, geographical, and seismological conditions. But generally, the checklist will look pretty similar for every AHJ that has adopted it. But obviously, adoption of this checklist is completely dependent on the AHJ. There are still many AHJs out there that always require a structural engineering analysis from a PE. There are some that never require an analysis, but basically, I hate to say consult your AHJ. But this checklist does actually allow for arrays that are 4 PSF or lighter for PV or 5 PSF or lighter for solar thermal to pass through this checklist. And hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. Next one, can you speak to the deltas between a DC PV array inspection versus an AC PV array?
Well, regarding inspections, AC PV array, you got to look at it like a lot of the hesitation from the AHJs is kind of a little bit of a fear of the unknown. So the these AHJs, the same inspector will walk up to a water heater that has high, it has a high potential to blow up if somebody didn't do their temp and pressure relief valve. It has gases, it has fumes, it has carbon monoxide, but they're familiar with it. So when it comes to a DC system or an AC system, most electrical inspectors will look at an AC system as being a little bit more familiar and a little bit more inherently safe. If you turn off the main breaker, you're killing everything. DC systems, you still have DC wiring, unless it's a power optimizer or a microinverter system or you have some sort of rapid shutdown. So the inspectors do view an AC module system as inherently safer from an electrical perspective, but they're looking at everything else associated with that installation exactly the same. But it's pretty much the electrical installation portion that they're going to look at it as inherently safe. And it might go a little quicker. I think the plan check goes a little faster, and the inspection might go a little faster.
Right. I mean, DC is kind of it's not nearly as well understood as AC power, and I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's the way things are.
Right. It has to do with the level of safety. Most of the codes and most of the code people are driven by safety. Is it going to burst into flames or become energized or fall down and hurt somebody? And when they look at that level of safety, I mean, it really boils down to the fact that the overcurrent protections in an AC system provide more protection for the conductors. It turns them off, like a rapid shutdown system. So they have less anxiety that something's going to go wrong with the system. So they're more inclined to sign it off probably a little quicker than a DC system.
Right.
Thank you. We have suggestions. Installers should bring extra labels. What do you think?
Yeah, installers should always have extra labels in their truck.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it makes total sense.
Definitely.
Well,
that was even part of our recommendations.
Right.
Well, I mean, imagine the frustration to an inspector to have to come back and re-inspect because there's a label missing, and they really do care. A lot of them really care that if somebody got hurt, I mean, this could really come back to haunt me. Even though they are bulletproof, unless they exercise malice, most inspectors really care about a level of safety. And when it comes to labeling, that's a pretty high mark. I mean, we're labeling these things to keep people safe.
Good. Don, this is a suggestion for you. It says, Don possibly mentioned that removing modules could require bonding grounding clivots for the entire system to be replaced, as many are only listed for one-time use.
Well, no, yeah, the weave clips I know are listed for one-time use. I don't know of too many that are listed for one-time use. But it's just the time-consuming difficulties of lifting the modules and then putting them back, and what are you doing to your bonding and if you have some sort of clamping device. And to me, it's just not a good practice to be requiring somebody to lift a module. It's really unnecessary unless there's a junction box or a combiner box underneath it that you really need to look inside. I mean, lifting a module to read a label, to me, is ridiculous when you could just have the guy take a digital picture of it or something. There's other methods of finding out whether the label's correct or whether the module's correct. There's absolutely no reason to lift the module other than looking into a J-box or a combiner box.
Right. If one wants to prove that the modules installed on a roof were the modules that were shown on the plans, I recommend taking a photo of the nameplate of the module, maybe with a piece of paper showing the address and the permit number or something like that visible in the photo as well, just to show this is the module that was installed according to the plans, and hopefully you have the supporting documentation showing what module that is. And again, like Don said, taking photos of any of the wiring under the array or of the junction box, that might also help as well.
To me, it goes back to the communication of expectations. So as the AHJ, if I tell the installers, hey, listen, if you have a junction box that you're going to put under a module, I want to see it, have that module set aside, or explain those requirements or those expectations prior to the inspection, and then the installer can be on the roof all ready to go and had that one module set aside that said, hey, I couldn't put this junction box anywhere else but here, so I left this module aside for you. I'm going to clamp it down. I'd sign it off, walk away, trust the guy to clamp it down if he was that, you know, if he had that much foresight to leave it undone for me so that I could look in the J box and all the rest of his work looked good. So it's about expectations and communicating those.
Very good. So this follows really well into the next question that we have here. So installers should take photos of their installs as they're going in order to have ammo for AHJs. Yes. What about photos? I mean, do they make sense?
Since Alan has a regular practice at Sungevity to take photos of everything, regardless of whether the AHJ wants to see it or not, I'll let him answer this as to why that's important.
Well, I mean, it's not even just an internal practice, but I mean, like I said, some funding providers also require installation photos to be taken anyway. Taking care in your work should be something that any contractor should be doing. There should be some kind of quality assurance done after an installation, and I mean, I believe in taking photos regardless of whether it helps an inspection even, but it should move an inspection along more quickly than an inspector asking what the heck is actually going on in this junction box, for example, or anything that's concealed. I just believe that there should be some kind of quality assurance done after the installation. That's the biggest thing to me.
And in LA County, I mean, we're one to do only single inspections. We don't want to do progress inspections. We don't want to come back for corrections. So, you know, we're allowing people to take photos and video, and then at time inspections, we'll take a look at that, and that helps tremendously. So it's a really good tool. So I encourage folks to use that. Don, I guess this is for you also. Since you mentioned that J boxes should not be placed under modules that use one-time bonding grounding clips. Can you elaborate on that?
No, I really wasn't saying that you shouldn't place J boxes under modules. It's perfectly acceptable and perfectly legal to put a junction box underneath a module, whether or not it has a renewable bonding clip or not, a weed clip, because the NEC provides guidance on that. You have to replace the clip. Yeah. My statement is that it should not be encouraged for AHJs to be requiring people to lift modules unless they absolutely need to. And I think in the one case where I had somebody lift the module, if the guy would have had a photograph of the inside of that junction box, I certainly wouldn't have made him do that even. But you have to have, junction boxes have to be accessible. And if there's any way that you can use those in-deck roof ones or the ones that don't have to go underneath the module, I would say you're better off than, because somebody's going to have to service that junction box at some point. It's perfectly fine to put junction boxes beneath modules.
Right.
Okay, next, this is from Inspector. What is your experience in the directory requirement in NEC 705.10?
705.10 says that if the disconnects aren't located at the main, you have to put a directory. Basically, you just have to have a directory that says there's a disconnect over there for something. Your PV disconnects have to be grouped and identified. The code provides guidance on that in 705.10. There's a bunch of sections in the code book that actually require directories. There's probably 3 or 4 that require directories regarding this for solar and interconnection of equipment. It's really strictly for the fire department to be able to show up and say, hey, not only do I need to turn this off, I got to go over there to that garage and turn this off. Otherwise, you know, they're just going around the building looking for the disconnect for something. So the directory is a requirement for fire safety, for first responder safety.
Next one, Don mentioned an online permitting program that can be recommended to AHJs. Can you expand on that and the process for the AHJ if they're interested?
The process is you contact me. I was contacted recently by a Department of Energy grant recipient. I get a lot of requests for AHJ outreach, so I'm actually doing a little bit of AHJ outreach for them because I kind of have my finger on the pulse of the AHJs. So what this is this company called Power Clerk, I believe it is it's a company that Sunrun, which is a huge installer, has partnered with Clean Solar Research. They're being funded by the Department of Energy to develop online permitting programs, and as part of this development, they actually have the money to engage AHJs, and the AHJs that want to go online and want to work with them can wind up with a free online process. These people got the tools and the technology, and I can hook you up with them, and you can get right on there, and they'll start. It looks like a pretty cool tool. I mean, I wouldn't be promoting it if it wasn't. I think online permitting is the last, the holy grail to making this stuff really expedited. So send me an email. Again, it's don.hughes, don.hughes @energycenter.org, and I will forward you the email that I got from this corporation. I'll give you an introduction to the people doing it, and your jurisdiction can start doing online.
Yeah, Don, I saw a demo of the application. It's really, really good. Lots of flexibility there. And yes, AHJs are willing to work with this company to improve that system. Heck, they can get it for free. It's really cool. Okay, another question. We have an integrated flexible flashing with an ICC evaluation report, and I wonder what are the recommendations for inspecting the flashing system, and how will you interpret the third-party evaluation?
Ooh.
Wow. Is this way beyond?
No, not really. When it comes to flashings, there really aren't a lot of listed flashing products. It's more of how did you do it. So when it comes to properly flashing something, a lot of times that's dictated literally by the third party. Typically, it's an ICC or an ICBO report you get. A lot of jurisdictions, they'll show up and they'll say, do you have an ICBO report for this roof? It's called an ER report. If you want to go Google that, ER reports. It's done by ICC. So when it comes to third parties, here's the thing to know: accreditation. So anybody can say, hey, I have a lab that tests this, but you can't really test a product for something against a particular standard unless you're actually accredited to do so. So I would look to see what the accreditation at third-party testing facility is, and I'd look at the installation reports on that. But that's really the only standard there currently is for flashing products. There are, like I said, there are not really listed flashing products. That's more of a process than a product-driven element. So we do depend on the ER reports and the third-party reports on how to properly install that flash. Unless it's integrated. If it's integrated with the clamping system, that's going to be part of your UL 2703 listing. So it will just be listed as a support with integrated flashing. Most jurisdictions would never look into anything if you had a listed integrated part. We would just say, oh, that's good, they're listed. There's a few questions that are kind of beyond the scope of today's presentation, so I'm going to skip a couple of them. And here's another question. They can email them. They can email it to me if it's an inspection or a code-related question. Okay, excellent. Thanks, Don. Okay, one could also leave a module or two loose for inspection and then install and tie in after inspection. I think we touched up on that. That's a great practice. It helps the whole inspection process, makes it a little quicker.
Sure.
I was going to say, I think I would disclose that as soon as the inspector walked on the job. Hey, I left this loose for you. Because one of the things I would do is grab things to make sure they're tight. So if I reached down and grabbed that and it was loose, and the guy's like, oh, I left that loose for you, I'd be like, I don't believe you, and now I'm checking everything. So if you're going to do something like that, just say, hey, I left this loose so you could, don't let them find something like that. That's going to cause a red flag.
And don't forget about it either if the inspector doesn't check it out.
Thank you. Okay, there are cities that flat out refuse to do only one solar inspection, still requiring rough inspection. Is there anything that we can do, say, to insist that they get caught up with the new law?
Well, they're in violation of the law that was written. They're actually in violation of part of the law that says that you have to do a single inspection for this. It clearly states that. So that's one of the things that's not even in the recommendations of the guidebook that you need substantial conformance with. That's actually written in the language of the law in Part 65850 of the legislation in California Code. But the problem is, the teeth to this thing is that the jurisdiction doesn't get funding. So ultimately, you're left to maybe approach that county's legal counsel and say, how are you guys not enforcing this law? It is a law that they're supposed to be enforcing.
But also keep in mind that this isn't necessarily for all PV systems that that there should be only a single inspection. It's only supposed to be for eligible PV systems. So I forget exactly what eligible systems would be. I mean, it'll be under 10 kilowatts for the AC nameplate rating, single-family residence, roof-mounted. So it's not necessarily every PV system. So just make sure that you're aware of that.
Thank you. We experience inspectors arriving at the job site and refuse to do inspections without verification that the standoffs are secure. Any comments?
I guess the question that I would have is what kind of verification does the inspector need that the standoffs are secure? I mean, is this kind of pushback against the requirement to waive rough inspections? That's kind of my question about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it does, and that goes back to the statement of, you know, don't let them find that thing loose, because that's the only way to verify something is to grab it and pull on it and see if it's loose.
Right.
Again, it goes back to the expectations of the installer and the inspector sitting in the same room at the IAEI chapter meeting and saying, hey, how do you want to verify this? Go do that work in advance. Go in advance, find that AHJ, say, what do you want to verify my attachments? And if they say, I need to do a pre-inspection, say, that's against the law.
Right.
If it's a qualifying system.
One last question, but I think you already touched up on this. Can you please speak to the difference between a DC PV residential inspection versus an AC PV inspection?
They're exactly the same. Basically, you're looking at exactly the same stuff. It's really going to boil down to plan check and maybe not so concerned about, you know, the concerns a little bit, but the inspection is exactly the same. The difference is you're not required to have that caution solar labeling on your conduits, for instance. You can run a Romex right out of a junction box on the roof down through the building with AC wiring, and you can't do that with DC wiring. It would have to be in metal conduit. The differences are the installation processes and procedures and the safety concerns that are mitigated. But other than that, you're looking at exactly the same stuff. It's a PV system with modules, junction boxes, conduit systems, wiring, and overcurrent protection. The dissimilarities are very, very minor. But,
yeah, and if you take a look.
Yeah. Oh. Go ahead. I was going to say, but there are some concern mitigations that might make your inspection go, or your plan check go a little bit faster with an AC system.
And if you take a look at one of the toolkit documents from the Solar Permitting Guidebook, the Field Inspection Guide, it's worth noting that a lot of the stuff in the quick list isn't even completely specific for DC systems or AC systems. So really the difference is just going to be in the code requirements, but as far as the actual inspection goes, it should be more or less the same kind of inspection process.
Yeah, there's differences. You don't need a grounding electrode conductor coming off a DC system. You need equipment grounding. I mean, an AC system. There's a bunch of different requirements, right, but they're minor.
Right.
Well, it looks like that's the last of the questions and comments, and I want to thank all you folks that are online. The PowerPoint's available right now. You can download it under handouts, and we're asking you folks if you can we have a quick poll. If it's just one question, if you can, we're going to launch it right now. If you can just take a minute just to answer that, we really appreciate it. And also, I want to thank Don and Alan for making the time to present this issue and the recommendations and answering all the questions, and encourage you folks to visit the website, get more information, somehow participate in the meetings, and it's not, again, not just the solutions and the recommendations at the end, but the whole process, listening to the conversations that really are enlightening, and you'll hear many different perspectives. All of this is also available on our website. The meeting archives, summaries, and webinars are recorded, and you can download them from the website. So thank you all, and look forward to our next webinar.
Thanks for having me, guys. See you at the next one.
Thank you very much, guys. Awesome work.
Is the webinar still going?
Oh, we're still broadcasting. We're wrapping it up, waiting for the poll to finish. Okay, we're off air now. You there, Alan?
Yeah, sorry about that flickering. It's weird because I saw none of that on my own screen.
I don't know. It's odd. Maybe we're going to check with Citrix and see if they have some suggestions.
I mean, maybe my computer is just too much of a piece of junk. That's the only thing that I can guess.
Alan, did you see your presentation flickering?
Yeah.
I saw nothing. I mean, it all looked okay to me.
Okay.